Hello and welcome to this video recording on the programmatic deployment of the Sophos XG firewall on Azure with two servers behind it. So the last time that I did a recording about this concept or a similar one, I did a manual demonstration via the new Azure portal. And I'll encourage you, if you've not checked out that video, to go ahead and check that out on my YouTube channel. It's one that you'll find very useful because many of the things that we'll be talking about today, that I'll be automating today, um, relate to the things that I described in more details in my first video around this. So you benefit from watching that. So it's always been said in IT that before you can automate anything, first of all, you have to understand it manually. So that's the reason why I did the manual deployment first, and then we go straight now to automating it. So first of all, just a quick disclaimer. This won't be a video that I will be going into details about understanding and the creation of Azure HAM templates. So I will not be going into the details about how to understand the construct or the schema of the Azure HAM template. This is not what this video is about. It's my intention to make videos about that, but due to time constraints, I'm not able to for now. But it's one that I'm really desperate. I have a lot of concepts to share with other people about this. Whenever I get the time, I'll do that. But this is not the video for that. And also just to mention that this will not be a video where we go into details about PowerShell scripting also. That will take us a very long time. But again, this is stuff that are on my heart to really share with my YouTube audience at some point in the future. So when I get more time and I put out more recordings, I will be covering all these topics properly. So if this course is not about understanding and creation of Azure HAM template, and it's not about going into full details about PowerShell scripting, so what we'll be covering, it's simple what we'll be covering. What we'll be covering is using a script that I wrote and some templates that I've customized, and using those to automate not only the deployment of the Sophos XG firewall on Azure, but also the configuration of proper traffic flow. So if you watched my first video again, you know by now that proper traffic flow via a network appliance on Azure is not automatic. It's not something that you make any deployment to Azure and it's just going to flow and traffic flow will start working as you want. No, it's something that you have to understand how to manipulate traffic flow within Azure. It's very important when we start talking about network appliances. Okay, so next, let me show you where we're going to end up today. So where we'll end up at the end of this video is we'll end up here. So we'll end up with so all these are in the same resource group and stuff. Again, this is a concept that I won't be going into details about. Then the same resource group, we're going to end up with a WAN subnet and a LAN subnet. So all part of the same virtual network. And then we're going to end up with an XG firewall deployed on Azure programmatically. And by that, I mean using the Azure HAM template for the deployment. So this Sophos XG firewall, we have two network interface cards. One network interface card connected to the WAN subnet, and the other network interface card connected to the LAN subnet. And then we'll have two virtual machines, which are Windows machines. They could be Linux, they could be any form of virtual machine that you can deploy to Azure. They will have only one network card each that's connected to the LAN subnet. In other words, no one from the internet can reach them directly. But then what we now want to do, or what we'll be doing, is we'll be deploying all these programmatically in an automated fashion. And what we'll now end up doing is we'll end up configuring traffic flow or manipulating traffic flow within Azure, such that whenever these VMs want to go out to the internet, their traffic flow does not go via the default Azure Virtual Network Gateway and that's on the Azure Fabric. So rather, it's going to go to the network interface card of this UTM, oh, sorry, not the UTM, of this Sophos XG firewall. And the Sophos XG firewall will now be responsible for the communication between this backend subnet and the internet. And also, you can see this virtual, this VM card of virtual network card of this Sophos XG appliance is linked or connected to a public IP that's provided in Azure, and that will be how people can reach this XG appliance from the internet. So it's all like simple brief infrastructure, but how do we do this programmatically? How do we do this in an automated format? We did the manual one the last time, but this case we'll be doing the automated format. So first of all, the script side of things. So you will want to bookmark this page. So I will be putting this in the description below, so you can have a chance to review that. But all the scripts and the templates that I will be using today are on my GitHub under this repository called Sophos XG IaaS Lab. And I've got three main files, which will be the ones that you need to download. So you first of all need to download the Sophos XG IaaS Lab.json, which is a template file, a deployment template file that will deploy the and that covers what the construct is or what the schema is for the Sophos XG firewall that will be deploying to Azure and the two Windows servers that will be deploying to Azure. And then we have a parameter file here that we will be talking about that also very soon. And then we have a PowerShell script that I wrote. So feel free to customize this if you know what you're doing with PowerShell. I'm not putting any copyright or anything on that. You don't need to reference me or anything. Feel free to modify and customize if you know what you're doing. Okay, so let's move on to our outline for today, what we'll be going through today. So first thing is for us to be able to programmatically deploy the Sophos XG firewall to Azure, or actually any other marketplace appliance to Azure. First of all, we need to do this. So I'll maximize this and then minimize it afterwards. So first of all, we need to enable the Sophos XG firewall appliance for programmatic deployment. What do we mean? If you have an Azure subscription, and then you've got access to the Azure marketplace, you can't just begin to use PowerShell deployment or ARM template deployment to deploy all kinds of appliances or devices. No, that's not how it works. So because again, automation is something that's very powerful. It's easy for you to just go and deploy. You see how powerful this can be by the end of this video. It's very easy for me to go and just deploy about 100 XG appliances, Sophos XG appliances, and it's not going to take me like a lot of time to do that. Or I could probably just make a scripting mistake and then it deploys like 500 XG appliances or whatever. So what Microsoft wants us to do is to consciously make that decision to say, I want to enable this resource for programmatic deployment. How do we do that? So first of all, you go to your Azure portal. So on your Azure portal, if I go cancel this and just go, yeah. So on the left-hand side here, you see this billing menu here. So I click on the billing menu, and you see the subscription ID and subscription information over there. So what you want to do is click on the subscription that you want to be using for your programmatic deployment. In this case, I've got two subscriptions here. I think only one of them is still active, my MSDN subscription. So I click on that, and again, this is under the instructions I've put here. So you go under all settings here, and under all settings, you see this option here for programmatic deployment. So because I've already enabled this, you see that this is already enabled. So here you see all the marketplace offerings that you've enabled for programmatic deployment. That's very important. So one thing to also mention is that you see that even though we're planning to deploy Windows servers programmatically, they are not on this list. No, they are not on this list. They are enabled by default. So all the offerings from Microsoft, all the default Azure offerings that are not marketplace items, they are enabled by default. But if it's a marketplace item that you have to make an extra purchase for, you have to explicitly enable it for programmatic deployment. So the way to do that is number one, I can go back to our resources, or I can go search here, and I can go to just search for Sophos, for example, and I see the different offerings from Sophos. I can click on this. Let's go for the other one. So you see this option here where it says you want to deploy programmatically, get started. Um, so some of them you see this option that where you can click just below to enable programmatic deployment, but not all offerings have that. So the easiest way to enable this is do a manual deployment. So for example, I can click on the public preview and just click create and just go ahead and just manually deploy the Sophos XG appliance to Azure via the UI. So when I get to step 3, I'm going to accept a legal agreement. And once I do that and I finish the deployment, I can delete it. But if I go back on the billings and then I go to my subscription and then I go under all settings and then I go under programmatic deployment, whatever resource that I've deployed in the marketplace manually will be automatically enabled for programmatic deployment. So I hope that's clear. So let's move on quickly here. So that's what I've put in there. So let's minimize this and let's go for the next one. So the next one is what I showed you earlier, which is download the 3 files that are on my GitHub, which are the scripts that I've created for this and the customized Azure ham templates that I'll be using for this. So download them to your machine somewhere, a location on your machine. So you can just go to my GitHub and you can just go ahead and save link as or just download them, open them and download them. So they're just template files and PowerShell script. If I go back to the PowerShell script, you see what the script is, what the script does. Okay, so that's number 2. So just a quick description of the files. So the Sophos XG IIS lab.json file is just a deployment template file. I won't be going into details. A deployment template file. So in IT, when you're talking about IT scripting or IT infrastructure scripting, what other people call the concept of infrastructure as a code, you have 2 methods. So there is a method called iterative deployment model. So in that case, what that means is you are going to be manually specifying what you want to deploy. But then you have the other method called declarative. So these template files are kind of like a declarative method of scripting or coding infrastructure. Declarative is where I don't have to specify every single step in a deployment. I don't have to say, this is how you deploy the network adapter. This is how you deploy the VM. This is how you deploy the NSG resource network security group or whatever. I don't have to specify that. All I need to do is declare to Azure and say, this is the construct that I want. I want a VM with this size, with this name, and with these 2 network cards and in this subnet. So I declare that to Azure. Azure knows how to accomplish that task. So obviously, this is way much more effective than the other one. But there are in some situations where you may still need to use the other model also. So that's the deployment file. And then you have the deployment parameters file. So good scripting, it doesn't mean that if this is not correct for any other code that you see it bad scripting. That's not what I'm saying. But but part of like the idea behind good scripting is that the code is reusable. In other words, it's easy to customize and it's easy to reuse that. So one of the things with the Azure Ham template is you have this parameters file that contains what will typically in the old term called variables, but in the Ham term, they are no longer variables. But these are values that you supply to the script as a user. So this is where you get involved. So you see that when you get to step 3 of customizing the deployment. So this is where you get involved and where you say, and this is the name I want to put to this one. This is the number that I want to give to this one. So this is where, so writing like a code that is reusable, it's you separate the parameters file and from the template file, but then the parameters file is usually where you should go to make customizations. You should usually try to, or I usually try to write my templates in a form where I hardly have to go back to modify this deployment file and this deployment template file. So if I want to make any customizations, I usually like to write them or construct them in such a way that all my customizations I can make from this parameters file without um, having to modify this one. So, and then lastly, so now we have the template files and the parameter files, but then we have different methods of deploying these to Azure. So we can use the Azure UI like we used last time. We have the Azure CLI also that we can use. We have the Visual Studio, which if you have the Azure SDK installed, you can deploy it through Visual Studio also. Actually, when we'll be examining this, we'll be examining that using Visual Studio. So, but one other option is we also can deploy using PowerShell. So I will be deploying using PowerShell in this case. So, okay, so let's move on to the next one. Next one is customizing the deployment. So after you've downloaded the three files, now you need to customize the deployment. So to customize the deployment, there are two main places where you need to make your changes. So number one, after you download this Sophos XG IAS Lab parameters file, notice that's not the template file, but the parameters file. So let me open that. I've got it opened right here in Visual Studio 2015. So this is the parameters file, for example. And all you see in the parameters file is just, all you need to modify are where it says values. That's all you need to modify. And only if you want to modify it. If you're just using this for a lab environment, you may say, yeah, I'll just use David's values. But if you're using this, maybe you're customizing it for like a production environment, obviously you want to modify the values there. So you see things like the XGVM name, which is the name for the Sophos XG firewall that will be deploying, the DCVM name, which is the name for one of the Windows servers that will be deploying, the WebVM name, which is the name for the other. So the names are pretty like self-explanatory. You got the admin password, you got the VM size, you got the again, this is not like a really good one. There's a better way to achieve this rather than putting the admin password in plain text. So there's a way where you can deploy a key vault to Azure and have this linked to the key vault in Azure, so you don't have to store this in plain text. But again, I'm not going into details about Ham template here. We're just doing a quick deployment and showing how it works, just demonstration. So you have all these different values that you can use for your customization. So that's the first place that you make your customization, is the parameters file. So not this one. So except you know what you're doing, I would suggest not really modifying this one. But if you really know what you're doing, of course, you can feel free go in there and modify, adjust to your heart's content. Okay, so description of some of the parameter files are in the main template file. What do I mean by this? So if you open the main template file, again, not to modify it, but if you just open it, which is this one, you notice that description for some of the parameters are here. So for example, I've got here XGVM name, which you will be given a value to in this parameters file, which is the one that you'll be modifying. And there's a description here that says, hey, there's a name for the XG firewall, there's a name for the DC VM, there's a name for the web server VM, there's the name of the admin user, just quick brief descriptions of this. Okay, So we got that, and then we got the Sophos XG. So yeah, sorry. Then open the PowerShell script and edit only. So after you've edited the parameters file, and then you've saved it, or just say save both files. Yep. Open the PowerShell script and edit only the define order deployment variables. What do I mean by this? So you've downloaded 3 files, you've edited the parameters file to your heart's content, given it the values that you want, pretty self-explanatory. Then open this PowerShell file and you only editing one section of this PowerShell file. So if I open the PowerShell file here, and I mentioned there, I said, so if I collapse these different sections, which I've got descriptions on top to say what I'm doing in each different part of the code. So I've put in here and said, edit only the define order deployment variable section. So if you look here, you see that there's a section that says define order deployment variables. This is the only part that you will be editing. And what will you be putting here? Resource group name. Again, give it a name that you want. Resource deployment name, just give it another name that you want. Template file. So here, wherever you've downloaded this template file, you put that location here. And wherever you've downloaded the parameter file and then you've modified it and saved it, you put that location here. So that's all you're doing. So modify template file, modify this section of this PowerShell script. So after you've done that, save both files, of course. So then save both files. And then the next part is you deploy your infrastructure using PowerShell. And how do we do that? Let's go ahead and do that now. So deploy your infrastructure using PowerShell. So first of all, open the Sophos XG IaaS lab.ps1 script. So what that means is, for example, if I go to where I have this on my machine, I can right click this and I can open, or I can right click PowerShell on my machine and say run ISE. So I can run ISE, and then after I have ISE, PowerShell ISE open, I can go open and browse to the location and open from there. So this one just gives you a very good pin for executing PowerShell scripts. So open this PowerShell script with PowerShell ISE, and then once you've done that, log into your Azure account. So that's the very first thing that you do. So you don't just begin to run the script because the script is referencing or makes the assumption that you are logged into your Azure account. So the way to do that is very simple. I'm already logged in, but I'll just log in one more time for demonstration. Log in Azure RM account, and I just press enter to that. And then it comes up with this web interface for me to enter my yep, and then I'll put in my password here. So just take that off and just put in my password. And then I press enter. So I just put in my login and my password, and then it comes up and says, hey, David, you're logged in. Yep, thanks very much. I'm logged in. So that's good. So it comes here. So one of the things to notice there also is that it's given, it says your subscription name is Visual Studio. I could have more than one subscription. I could have 10 different subscriptions. But this one that I'm seeing here, that is the subscription that is going to use for any deployment that I'm going to be doing here on this interface. And the deployment will be using whatever is here on the subscription name, which is the reason why I've put in here, if you have multiple subscriptions, specify the default subscription that you want for this deployment. So in that case, I have to use get Azure RM subscription to list all my subscription. Get Azure RM subscription, and that shows me a list of all my subscription. 3, only one of them is actually active, this is disabled. And then if I wanted to, I could go select Azure RM subscription. So for example, let's say I want to use my Dreamstats subscription for this deployment. I can say select Azure RM subscription, and I specify the subscription name as DreamSpark. Yep, and I present that to that, and then that becomes the default for this particular deployment. So just to mention that. So if you have multiple subscriptions, don't forget to do that to avoid being charged on another subscription that you don't want to be charged. That's particularly important if you've got like MSDN and pay as you go and you want to use your MSDN for your lab environment. Okay, so after doing that, next thing is just run the script, and that is it. It's as simple as that. So I have the script here, and I've put in there, I said, run the script section by section or remove the section bracket to run at once. What do I mean by that? Here you can see I've got them in different sections. If you want to just run everything, you can just click this one, but this will not work. So first of all, I need to get rid of this curly bracket in front of the section script. So get rid of this curly bracket, and then I can be able to run everything at once. But what I can just do in this case, I can run them section by section. So for example, I can highlight this section, excluding the bracket, and I can use this option here, which is run my selection. So, and then you can see what the script is doing. So I can walk you through what it's doing as I run it. So, or what I've designed it to do. So this is very, very important, because the very first thing that I've put in here is to get a list of all the Azure RM locations. So it gets a list of all the Azure RM locations and maps them to values. And then we can select the value that we want, and then it stores that in a variable called location. So for example, if I run that now, it comes up and says, hello, enter the number of value of the Azure region to use. So this again is very important, because the last time I think I remember I selected UK South because that's a new Azure region. So I selected UK South, and then I was trying to deploy a VM of size D3, standard D3, and then it says, standard D3 is not yet available in UK South because it's a newer region. So you may want to research online about what's available in the region that you're selecting before you select that. Otherwise, some parts may fail. So in this case, I just select the old one I used to use, which is West Europe, which is mapped to value 12. So if I go value 12, presenter, your Azure region is West Europe. And then what I've just basically done is, this is now stored in a variable called location, and that's West Europe. So I've got that in the variable called location. Now, here's the modification, the customization that you've made earlier. So I've got mine here. There's no need for me to make any changes. I just run this part again. Remember, I exclude the bracket, so curly bracket, and I run that, and it just stores this in variable. So if I go resource group name, it shows me what's in that variable and other stuff. If I go template file name, it's all stored in a variable. Okay, so create the resource group. So again, I just select this one without the curly bracket, and I run the selection, and it's going to create a resource group for me. And then here's the good part, is that if I go back to my Azure portal and I click on resource group at the top, here we go. As the resource group I just created, it's all there, but you know what? It's completely empty. There's no resource to display. And then here is where her magic comes in, the power of automation. It's why I'm always and always will be a fan of automating anything you can automate within your infrastructure. Do it. So you see, deploy the Sophos XG and 2 Windows servers to Azure. So I select this and I run the selection, and then it's going to validate the template, and then it's going to start the deployment. And then as it starts the deployment, you start seeing this get populated. So if I refresh that, all of a sudden it's getting populated already with all our deployment. And what I'll do is I'll pause the recording, and then actually based on this time, we'll be able to time how long it takes to complete this deployment. And so once the deployment is completed, so look at that. So everything is getting populated. See, very cool. Very, very cool. I don't have to like go through like all the manual steps of me creating all this that I showed you earlier. You can just run this, and it will all be done in a few minutes. So I'll pause this recording and I'll be back once the deployment is completed. Welcome back. Okay, so that didn't take too long at all. So let's see what time it started. So that started at 22:58. That completed at so that's less than 8 minutes for the whole deployment to complete. Now that's way faster than the time that it took us the last time that we did that manually. And then the last one is we run this last part of the code, which is to apply user-defined route to LAN subnet. So for those that have watched the first video, you understand what this means. So this is where we have to make sure that the traffic is passing through the XG and not through just the default Azure Virtual Network Gateway that's in the Azure Fabric. So if I go ahead and just run this last part of the code, and that should take just a few minutes and that should all be done. And then actually, if you look at this, so if I just refresh that, look at the amount of resources that we've managed to deploy in less than 8 minutes. We've got our XG firewall, we've got 2 Windows server all in the back end, and everything is just about done. And then we can move on to the next step. So while this one is being completed, what I'll do, yep, that's done. So basically everything is done. Our whole infrastructure is ready. Now we can begin to test and play around with it. So this is really good for people that want to test like the XG in the environment, Sophos XG Firewall. It's a really good one to use to just set up a test lab environment. Okay, so one of the first things I'll do is I'll go to the XG Firewall and I'll get its public IP address because that's how I will connect to it. So I'll get the public IP address. I'll just copy that. And then if I go paste this HTTPS and use, if you're familiar with the Sophos XG firewall, the port is 4444 for web administration. And then if I click that, and now I'm on my XG firewall on Azure. Log in with the username and my password. Username is admin. The password is what I've specified in the parameter template file. So if I go log into that, and then I'm logged in. Now I can just go ahead and do my registration activation. Again, you can get a Sophos trial if you go to Sophos website and just, if you Google Sophos XG trial, Sophos XG trial, you'll be able to get a serial number that you can put in there and use for trial in a bring your own license scenario. What I'll do is I'll use one of my trial serial numbers, which I have here with me, and I'll do that off the screen so that you won't be using my serial number. So I'll just go get my evaluation serial number. Okay, so I'll be back in a minute. I'll just put my serial number in. All I'm doing is putting in my serial number and activating the device. And you can't see this, but it's just activating device activated. And then what I click is, because I already registered the serial number, I just click synchronize license. So assuming it's a new serial number, I'll first of all register the device, but that's for another video. That's for a completely different video. So I'll just, yep, and then, yeah, so that's done. So if I click here to start configuring my device, I can click that and I can skip the wizard for now. And here I am on my Sophos XG 16 firewall on Azure. So the next thing is, let's go back to our outline. Is now we've done this, we've run the script section by section, we've completed it, and I'll minimize that. And the next part is, I'm not sure, I think did I miss that? So there's another part which is number 5, which is create firewall rules to allow backend access to the Windows server or servers. I'll just demonstrate with one, but we've got multiple servers. So what I mean by that is, now we've got this whole situation all set up, but these Windows servers, number one, they can get out to the internet, because again, remember that now we've configured them such that all their traffic is going via the XG, but we have no firewall to allow access to the internet. But also, I can't get to these servers. There's no way for me to get to these servers. So because they don't have any public IPs, I've not deployed them with public IPs. They're all private infrastructure machines. So if I go to my Azure portal, for example, and let's walk through this together. So if I go back and I go to my my domain controller. So let's go to this one. So there's no public IP that I can use to get to it. If I go on the network interface, it's only got one, and it's got a private IP which is 10.0.2.4. So there really is nothing, like there's no way for me to get to this. So what I'll do in this case, I'll go to my XG, I'll create a DNAT rule, business application rules, that will give me access. I'll just select the DNAT rule and I'll say LDP to backend domain controller to backend DC. And I'll put that at the top. I'll select the zone from 1, which is the wide area network zone. And I'll say any network from the 1 zone. This is something I'll destroy afterwards. Going to my 1 port, which is this one here. And I'll say forward port 3389 to, I'll create a new object for my DC. It'll be Azure DC1, got 1. And I give it the IP address, which is 10.0.2.4 when I checked, which is this one. And I save there. So I got my protected server. The protected zone is LAN zone. And then if I save that, and what I actually do is I actually open also shell access to the XG firewall on Azure. So open shell access to it, log in as admin, and then if I do -i 10.0.2.4, this is what I want. I missed any there. Yeah, and then if I just bring up remote desktop connection and try to do a remote desktop connection to my the public IP address of my XG firewall. So if I click connect, and there we go. It's already using the DNAT rule that I created, and it's already redirecting me. So if I log in as Azure admin with my password, and there you go, I'm logging into my Azure, my backend server that I don't have any public access to. I'm logging into it. So that shows me that now I can get through the XG to the backend. And now if this is a web server, I'll just stop this. I've already going crazy. I can now configure things like WAF to protect this backend server, which is some things I can't do on Azure by default. Without a specialized network appliance like the Sophos XG firewall. So here I am on my backend server. And here's the other thing that I'll just verify before closing, is to verify that traffic, outbound traffic, is also not going through the Azure Fabric, but is going through my XG firewall. So what I'll just do is I'll do a drop packet capture. I'll do a drop packet capture, and from my backend server, I will just ping Google's DNS, which is 8.8.8.8. And if I press enter to that, what you notice is that on my XG firewall, you can see the traffic getting dropped from my XG firewall. Why is it getting dropped? Because the traffic is passing through the XG firewall. And you can see it keeps getting dropped on the XG firewall. And then if I just do a continuous ping, and then if I go back to my XG firewall and create a rule to allow outbound traffic to say LAN to 1 and say source zone from LAN zone, and a network destination zone to 1 zone, and a network allow any service. So leave there and just save that. So now I've got this one, and then if I go back to my backend server, now I'm able to get to Google. And all that, if I do just connection tracking, you can see that that is indeed going from my backend server out through the XG firewall to the internet. So that's wonderful and that's awesome. and that took us just a few minutes to complete. So I hope this video has been very helpful to you. I'll just leave you with one final resource. So if you go to GitHub and just Sophos IaaS, you'll find a template that was put out by Sophos. If you go under XG Azure, again, I'll put this in the description below. You'll find a template that you can download and modify as you want here also. So thanks very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next recording. Bye.